In war, history is often written not only by the victors, but by the decisions made in rooms filled with maps, cigarette smoke, and silence thick enough to suffocate reason. In this video, we will uncover 20 real decisions during World War II that came terrifyingly close to changing the fate of the entire world. Orders delayed by hours, commands ignored, strategic gambles that nearly collapsed entire fronts, moments when generals hesitated, or dictators interfered, and the course of history balanced on a knife's edge. It's great to have you here. If you enjoy these war journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought in the comments below. This helps others find their way here too. For now, let's begin our journey. From Berlin to Moscow, from London's underground bunkers to the Pacific waters near Midway, these are the decisions that almost rewrote the outcome of the deadliest conflict in human history. And we begin in May 1940. The German war machine was unstoppable. Blitzkrieg had shattered Poland. Denmark had fallen in a day. Norway followed. Then came the lightning assault through the Ardennes forest, a move so bold the Allies believed it impossible. Within weeks, British and French forces were trapped against the sea near the French port of Dunkirk. Over 330,000 Allied soldiers stood with their backs to the English Channel. The German panzer divisions had a clear path to annihilation. One final push, and Britain would be forced to negotiate peace. Without its army, without hope, would Winston Churchill have continued the fight? Churchill later called Dunkirk a miracle of deliverance, but it existed because of hesitation at the highest level of the German command. Decision number 1, and it was only the beginning. In the summer of 1941, another decision would echo far louder. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, was the largest military invasion in human history. Over 3 million Axis troops stormed east into the vast lands of the USSR. At first, everything seemed to unfold exactly as Hitler envisioned. Soviet armies collapsed. Hundreds of thousands were captured in encirclements near Minsk and Smolensk. German forces advanced at breathtaking speed towards Moscow. But then, in August 1941, Hitler made a fateful choice. Instead of driving directly towards Moscow, the political and logistical heart of the Soviet Union, he diverted key armored units south towards Ukraine and north towards Leningrad. Generals like Franz Halder argued fiercely that Moscow was the decisive objective. The capital was the nerve center of Soviet communications, industry coordination, and morale. Hitler disagreed. He believed economic targets, grain fields, oil, and industrial regions were more important. That diversion delayed the advance on Moscow by critical weeks. When German forces finally resumed their push towards the Soviet capital in Operation Typhoon, autumn rains had turned roads into rivers of mud. Vehicles sank, supply lines stretched thin across hundreds of miles. Then came the Russian winter. Temperatures plummeted to -30 degrees Celsius. Lubricants froze, weapons jammed. Soldiers wrapped themselves in blankets stolen from villages. Frostbite claimed more casualties than Soviet bullets. By December, the Red Army counterattacked under the leadership of Georgy Zhukov. Fresh Siberian divisions, trained for winter warfare, pushed exhausted German forces back from the gates of Moscow. Had Germany captured Moscow before winter, would the Soviet Union have collapsed? Many historians argue it might not have ended the war immediately, but it could have shattered Soviet command and morale beyond repair. That delay, that decision to split focus, cost Germany its best chance at victory in the East. Decision number 2.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, another pivotal choice was taking shape. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. The attack was devastating. Battleships burned. Over 2,400 Americans were killed. The United States entered the war. But one decision made during that attack would later haunt Japan. The Japanese strike force, commanded by Chuichi Nagumo, launched 2 waves of aircraft. They crippled much of the Pacific Fleet's battleship force. However, Nagumo chose not to launch a 3rd wave. Fuel storage facilities, submarine pens, and critical repair docks remained intact. The American aircraft carriers, the true strategic targets, were not even in harbor. Had Japan destroyed the fuel reserves and infrastructure at Pearl Harbor, the United States might have been forced to withdraw its fleet back to California. The Pacific campaign could have been delayed by months, perhaps even a year. Instead, America repaired, rebuilt, retaliated. Just 6 months later, the balance of naval power would shift dramatically at the Battle of Midway. But that turning point came because of decisions made and not made at Pearl Harbor. Decision number 3. In North Africa, another gamble nearly altered the Mediterranean theater. German General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, commanded the Africa Corps with audacity and brilliance. His rapid maneuvers repeatedly outflanked British forces across Libya. By mid-1942, Rommel stood at the gates of Egypt. The Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to India and its empire, lay within reach. Yet Rommel's supply lines were dangerously overstretched. Fuel shortages plagued his tanks, ammunition ran low. Despite this, he pushed forward toward El Alamein. Some German commanders urged caution, consolidate, resupply, fortify positions. Rommel pressed on. At the Second Battle of El Alamein, British forces under Bernard Montgomery launched a massive counteroffensive. Superior numbers, superior logistics, air superiority. Rommel's forces were driven back in a retreat that never truly stopped. Had Rommel secured the Suez Canal, the Middle East's oil fields might have fallen into Axis hands. Supply routes to the Soviet Union could have been severed. Instead, North Africa became a slow bleed for Germany. Decision number 4. These were not random mistakes. They were moments of confidence, ego, miscalculation, overreach, and each one reshaped the battlefield. In war, it is rarely the obvious battles alone that determine victory. Sometimes it is a pause, a delay, a diversion, a wave of aircraft never launched, a capital never captured. And as we move forward, we will explore even more decisions, from the Atlantic U-boat campaign to the failure to prioritize jet technology, from intelligence breakthroughs to political misjudgments that nearly tipped the scales of World War II in a completely different direction. The war was not inevitable in its outcome. It was shaped, step by step, by decisions made under pressure, and some of them came frighteningly close to changing everything.
As 1942 unfolded, the war had become a global inferno. The Axis powers stretched from the Atlantic coast of France to the outskirts of the Caucasus, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Southeast Asia. Yet beneath the surface of apparent dominance, cracks were forming, not only on battlefields, but in decisions made by men who believed they could bend history to their will. One of those decisions began deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Germany's U-boat fleet was strangling Allied shipping. In what became known as the Battle of the Atlantic, wolf packs prowled shipping lanes, sinking merchant vessels faster than Britain and the United States could replace them. In early 1942, during what American sailors grimly called the Second Happy Time, German submarines operated almost freely along the U.S. East Coast. Yet a strategic decision in Berlin would prove costly. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz had long argued for a massive expansion of the U-boat fleet before the war even began. He believed that 300 operational submarines could sever Britain's lifeline and force surrender without a land invasion. But Hitler had prioritized surface ships, grand battleships like the Bismarck, symbols of prestige over practicality. When the war began, Germany had nowhere near the submarine numbers Donitz had requested. The result? A campaign that came close to success, but never fully achieved strategic strangulation. By 1943, Allied technological improvements, radar, sonar, convoy systems, and long-range aircraft turned the tide. The U-boat threat diminished. Had Germany committed fully to submarine warfare before 1939, Britain might have faced economic collapse before American industrial might came online. It was a decision rooted in vanity, and it cost the Axis its best chance at isolating the British Isles.
Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, another catastrophic miscalculation was taking shape. By summer 1942, Hitler launched Case Blue, an ambitious plan to seize oil fields in the Caucasus. Fuel shortages were crippling the German war machine. Oil meant mobility. Mobility meant victory. But once again, Hitler divided his forces. Army Group South was split into two separate thrusts, one toward the Caucasus oil fields, the other toward the city on the Volga that bore Joseph Stalin's name, Stalingrad. What began as a secondary objective quickly became an obsession. Hitler demanded the city be taken at all costs. Urban combat turned into a nightmare of rubble and close-quarters brutality. Entire divisions were swallowed in street-to-street fighting. Snipers hunted through shattered factories. The Volga ran red. German General Friedrich Paulus repeatedly requested flexibility, the ability to withdraw or reposition if necessary. Hitler refused. When Soviet forces encircled the German Sixth Army in November 1942, Paulus asked permission to break out. Once again, Hitler denied it, insisting the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped army by air. It was impossible. Starvation followed. Frostbite returned. Ammunition dwindled. In February 1943, Paulus surrendered. Over 90,000 German soldiers went into captivity. Had Hitler allowed a breakout early in the encirclement, tens of thousands of experienced troops might have escaped. The Eastern Front could have stabilized. The psychological blow of defeat at Stalingrad, one of the greatest turning points of World War II, might never have occurred. Instead, stubbornness replaced strategy, and the Red Army gained momentum it would never relinquish. Across the globe in the Pacific, another decision unfolded that would alter naval warfare forever. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan sought to eliminate American carrier power decisively. The plan culminated in June 1942 near a tiny atoll called Midway. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto orchestrated an elaborate trap, hoping to lure American carriers into destruction. But complexity became vulnerability. Communication gaps, scattered forces, and overconfidence weakened coordination. On the morning of June 4, Japanese aircraft struck Midway Island. As Japanese carriers rearmed planes for a second strike, reports arrived of American naval presence. Admiral Nagumo hesitated. Switch armaments from bombs to torpedoes? Launch immediately? Wait for full preparation? That hesitation proved fatal. American dive bombers, arriving almost by accident at the perfect moment, descended upon the exposed Japanese carriers. Within minutes, 3 carriers were burning. A 4th would soon follow. The Battle of Midway destroyed the core of Japan's experienced naval aviation. Had Nagumo launched sooner, or had reconnaissance been more effective, the United States might have lost its remaining carriers. The Pacific balance could have shifted dramatically, perhaps prolonging the war by years. Instead, initiative passed to America. In Europe, 1943 brought another monumental crossroads: the invasion of Western Europe. Before D-Day became reality, Allied leadership debated strategy fiercely. British Prime Minister Churchill favored peripheral attacks, North Africa, Italy, weakening Germany gradually. American leadership pushed for a direct cross-channel invasion into France as soon as possible. Delays frustrated Soviet leader Stalin, who demanded a second front to relieve pressure on the Eastern Front. The decision to postpone a French invasion until 1944 meant another year of brutal Soviet casualties. But had the Allies invaded too early, in 1942 or 1943, without sufficient landing craft, air superiority, and preparation, the invasion might have failed catastrophically. Operation Overlord required overwhelming logistics. When it finally came in June 1944, it succeeded, but barely. Weather nearly canceled it. German armored divisions were held back due to confusion within the German High Command. One of the most consequential German decisions involved Field Marshal Erwin Rommel yet again.
Rommel believed Allied air superiority made it impossible to move reserves inland once the invasion began. He argued that armored divisions must be stationed close to the beaches to crush any landing immediately. Others insisted reserves remain deeper inland for a concentrated counterattack. Hitler compromised and then kept personal control over key armored units. On the morning of D-Day, as Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy, requests to deploy panzer divisions required Hitler's direct authorization. He was asleep. Hours passed. Those hours allowed Allied forces to secure beachheads. Had German armor counterattacked immediately with full force, the Allied landings might have been thrown back into the sea. Instead, delay once again shaped destiny. And as 1944 progressed, another decision nearly reversed Allied momentum. In December, Hitler launched a surprise counteroffensive through the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. His objective was audacious: split Allied lines, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace in the West. Initially, the attack achieved surprise. American units were caught off guard. The front bulged dramatically. But the plan depended on speed and fuel.
German forces ran critically low on gasoline. Allied air power returned as weather cleared. Stubborn American defense at Bastogne delayed the advance. Had the weather remained poor longer, grounding Allied aircraft, and had German units captured critical fuel depots intact, the offensive might have fractured Allied coordination. It did not. Germany had gambled its last reserves. Each of these decisions shared a pattern: ambition outpacing logistics, pride overriding prudence, hesitation replacing clarity. The war was not simply won by superior numbers or industry. It was shaped in moments of uncertainty. A submarine fleet never fully realized, an army forbidden to retreat, aircraft rearmed at the wrong moment, armored divisions waiting for a sleeping dictator's approval. And still, even as 1944 closed and Axis defeat seemed inevitable, there remained decisions, technological, political, and moral, that could have altered the final chapter of the war in ways almost unimaginable. Nuclear research, assassination attempts, the race for Berlin, Japan's final gamble. By 1944, the Axis war machine was no longer advancing, it was surviving. Yet even in retreat, decisions made in laboratories, bunkers, and desperate strategy meetings still carried the power to alter the fate of millions. One of the most chilling what-if moments of the war did not unfold on a battlefield at all, but in the realm of science. In the late 1930s, German physicists were among the world's most advanced. When nuclear fission was discovered, scientists within Nazi Germany began exploring its military potential. The possibility of an atomic bomb was not science fiction, it was theoretical reality. Yet the German nuclear program never achieved what the United States would later accomplish through the Manhattan Project. Why? Part of the answer lies in a series of decisions shaped by ideology and miscalculation. Many brilliant Jewish scientists had already fled Germany due to persecution, including minds who would later contribute to American research. Meanwhile, Nazi leadership never fully committed the massive industrial resources necessary for atomic development. Some within the regime believed such a weapon was years away and prioritized immediate battlefield technologies instead. Had Germany concentrated its industrial might on nuclear research early, as the United States did after 1942, the outcome of World War II might have entered an entirely different and terrifying dimension. Imagine a V-2 rocket tipped not with conventional explosives, but with atomic fire. Speaking of rockets, another decision with enormous implications centered on advanced weapons technology. Germany developed the world's first operational ballistic missile, the V-2. It was revolutionary. Launched from mobile platforms, traveling faster than the speed of sound, impossible to intercept with the technology of the time. But the V-2 program consumed vast resources, materials, skilled labor, industrial capacity. At the same time, Germany had also pioneered jet aircraft technology. The Messerschmitt Me-262 was the first operational jet fighter in history.
It was faster than any Allied aircraft. Yet Hitler made a crucial decision. He insisted the Me-262 be used as a bomber rather than a pure interceptor. Fighter pilots and engineers protested. They argued that as an interceptor, the jet could devastate Allied bomber formations and slow the destruction of German industry. Hitler saw it as a blitz bomber, a revenge weapon to strike ground targets. That delay in deploying the Me-262 in its optimal role cost Germany air superiority at a critical moment. Had jet interceptors entered large-scale service earlier and been used exclusively to destroy Allied bombers, the strategic bombing campaign might have been severely disrupted. Another decision rooted in ego and revenge weakened Germany's final defensive shield. Meanwhile, within Germany itself, resistance was brewing. On July 20, 1944, a group of German officers attempted one of the most daring acts of the war, the assassination of Adolf Hitler. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg placed a bomb inside Hitler's Wolf Lair headquarters in East Prussia. The plan was simple but bold: eliminate Hitler, seize control of Berlin, and negotiate peace with the Western Allies before Soviet forces consumed Germany entirely. The bomb exploded, but the heavy wooden conference table absorbed much of the blast. Hitler survived with minor injuries. In the chaotic hours that followed, conspirators hesitated, communications faltered, loyalty wavered. The coup collapsed. Had Hitler died that day, Germany's leadership structure might have fractured. A negotiated surrender in the West could have prevented the division of Germany that followed. Millions of additional casualties on the Eastern Front might have been avoided. Instead, Hitler tightened his grip. Executions followed, and Germany marched toward total ruin. As Allied forces pushed from the west and Soviet armies thundered from the east, another decision would shape the final map of Europe: who would capture Berlin? By early 1945, American and British forces were advancing rapidly into Western Germany. Some Allied commanders considered a direct drive toward Berlin. Militarily, it was possible. But Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower made a strategic decision: halt Western Allied forces short of Berlin and allow the Soviet Red Army to take the German capital. The reasoning was partly political. Agreements had already been made regarding occupation zones. It was also practical. Berlin lay deep within the area assigned to Soviet control after the war. Soviet forces under Georgy Zhukov launched a brutal assault in April 1945. Street fighting consumed the city. Casualties soared into the hundreds of thousands. Had Western allies raced for Berlin first, Western Europe might have looked very different. The Cold War boundary lines might have shifted westward or eastward. The symbolic capture of Berlin carried immense political weight. Instead, the Red Army raised its flag over the Reichstag, and Europe was divided for nearly half a century. Across the globe, in the Pacific, Japan faced a different kind of impending catastrophe. By 1945, Japanese cities were already suffering under relentless conventional bombing. Firebombing raids devastated urban centers. Yet Japan's military leadership remained divided over surrender. The United States had developed a new weapon, one unlike anything the world had seen: the atomic bomb. American leadership faced an extraordinary moral weight: invade the Japanese home islands and risk hundreds of thousands of casualties, or use the atomic bomb in hopes of forcing immediate surrender. On August 6, 1945, the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another struck Nagasaki. The shock was profound. But even then, surrender was not immediate. Within Japan's leadership, some argued to continue fighting. Others saw no future. Emperor Hirohito intervened personally, a rare act, choosing to accept surrender.
Had Japan chosen continued resistance, the planned Allied invasion of the home islands could have resulted in catastrophic casualties on both sides. The Pacific War might have stretched into 1946. Instead, a decision ended it abruptly and ushered humanity into the nuclear age. And yet, even as the war ended, its consequences were shaped by decisions that almost unfolded differently. The Soviets could have reached deeper into Western Europe. The Western Allies could have pressed farther east. Germany could have fragmented into smaller states permanently. Japan could have been divided like Korea. The fragile balance at the end of World War II was not predetermined. It was negotiated, calculated, chosen. Over and over again throughout the war, leaders made decisions under pressure, sometimes driven by logic, sometimes by pride, sometimes by desperation. Some were catastrophic mistakes. Some were narrow escapes. Some were moral crossroads that still echo today.
As the war entered its final violent chapter in 1945, the battlefield was no longer the only arena where history trembled. Decisions now extended beyond victory or defeat. They would determine the architecture of the modern world. Germany was collapsing from within. Cities lay in ruins under relentless Allied bombing. Refugees clogged frozen roads. The once unstoppable Wehrmacht was reduced to fragmented defensive lines. And yet, even at the edge of total destruction, Adolf Hitler refused to authorize strategic withdrawals that might preserve what remained of his forces. Generals urged him to shorten the front, consolidate around defensible terrain, and protect civilian corridors. He chose fanatic resistance. Entire divisions were ordered to hold positions to the last man. Bridges were destroyed behind retreating troops, trapping civilians in the path of advancing armies. The decision transformed Germany's final months into a campaign of annihilation rather than survival. Had German leadership chosen surrender earlier, even in early 1945, millions of civilian deaths, rapes, and reprisals might have been prevented. Instead, ideological rigidity extended the suffering. Meanwhile, the Western Allies faced their own defining choices. At the Yalta Conference, leaders of the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union gathered to shape post-war Europe. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin negotiated borders, occupation zones, and the political future of liberated nations. Poland became one of the most contentious issues. Promises of free elections were made. Spheres of influence were quietly acknowledged. Had the Western Allies drawn a harder line against Soviet territorial demands, confrontation might have erupted immediately, perhaps even reigniting conflict between former allies. Instead, compromise prevailed, setting the stage for the Cold War. The decisions at Yalta did not merely end a war, they divided a continent. Back in Berlin, as Soviet artillery thundered ever closer, Hitler made his final choice. He would not flee. On April 30th, 1945, inside his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. His decision removed any possibility of negotiated surrender through him. It also left Germany's fragmented leadership scrambling to arrange capitulation. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. But in the Pacific, the war still raged. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan stood at an existential crossroads. Hardline military leaders argued that even after nuclear devastation, a final homeland defense could inflict enough casualties to secure better surrender terms. Others recognized the futility. In a rare and decisive intervention, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation by radio, an unprecedented act. He accepted surrender, citing the new and most cruel bomb.
Had the emperor sided with the militarists, Operation Downfall, the Allied invasion of Japan, would have commenced. Casualty projections ranged into the hundreds of thousands for Allied troops and potentially millions for Japanese civilians. Instead, a single imperial decision ended the Pacific War. Yet even in victory, choices remained. The United States now possessed nuclear monopoly. Soviet forces had advanced deep into Eastern Europe. Suspicion replaced wartime cooperation almost immediately. One pivotal decision emerged in 1945 and 1946, whether to share atomic research internationally or retain strategic dominance. The United States chose secrecy. The Soviet Union accelerated its own atomic program. The arms race began. Another decision involved reconstruction. Rather than impose permanent economic paralysis on Germany, as some had suggested after the First World War, the United States implemented the Marshall Plan, pouring billions into European recovery. It was a calculated strategy. Economic stability would prevent the rise of extremist movements and contain Soviet expansion. Had Europe been left in ruins without reconstruction, desperation could have fueled new radical ideologies. Political chaos might have destabilized Western democracies. Instead, recovery reshaped the continent. Across Asia, decisions also reverberated. Korea, once occupied by Japan, was divided at the 38th parallel, intended as a temporary administrative line between Soviet and American zones. It hardened into a permanent border, eventually erupting into the Korean War. Vietnam, Indonesia, and other former colonies entered turbulent struggles for independence. The vacuum left by defeated imperial powers triggered new conflicts. The end of World War II did not bring peace everywhere. It redistributed power. It ignited ideological confrontation.
It introduced nuclear deterrence as the defining feature of global security. Looking back at the 20 decisions we have explored, the halt at Dunkirk, the diversion from Moscow, the hesitation at Midway, the refusal to retreat at Stalingrad, the delayed deployment of jets, the failure of assassination, the choice not to race for Berlin, the use of atomic weapons, the agreements at Yalta, one truth becomes unmistakable. History is not inevitable. It is constructed moment by human choice. Some decisions were driven by ego, some by fear, some by hope, some by calculation, and many were made with incomplete information under unimaginable pressure. What makes these moments so haunting is how close they came to producing a different world. A Britain forced to negotiate, a Soviet Union collapsing in 1941, a Pacific War prolonged into 1946, a Europe liberated by different armies, a nuclear weapon developed by Nazi Germany. The margins were razor thin. The consequences were colossal. World War II is often told as a story of inevitability, of industrial superiority and overwhelming force, but beneath the statistics and grand strategies lies something far more human: hesitation, ambition, pride, desperation, leadership, failure, courage, and the understanding that even in the darkest hours of global conflict, a single decision can ripple across generations. If you watched this documentary until the end, comment the word "decision" below so we know you stayed with us through every turning point. Tell us in the comments, which of these moments do you believe came closest to changing the outcome of the war? Don't forget to like the video if you appreciate deep, real historical storytelling like this, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful war documentaries that go beyond the surface. And keep watching. The next videos appearing on your screen will take you even deeper into the untold realities of history's greatest conflicts.